Star Wars Outlaws was a very disappointing and lackluster game on release, with some of the worst stealth I've ever seen, awful combat, clunky as hell gameplay, along with many other flaws. But finally, 3 months later, we have a huge free update which Ubisoft are calling the biggest one yet, promising to improve combat, stealth, and many of its flaws. Is Star Wars Outlaws finally worth your time? After hours of playing, stick with me, this is my brutally honest view with no BS. Before we find out how much of an impact this huge update has had, it's very important we first address the major flaws and what made Star Wars Outlaws so bad. Most missions in this game involve entering restricted areas undetected, which isn't a problem, but when the game has such a large focus on stealth, you'd expect it to be decent and a heavily polished aspect of the game. Well, that is far from the case, and I can't tell you how many times I got majorly pissed off with how god-to-crud awful the stealth is. Enemies could literally hear a single shit follicle leaving your ass, which makes stealth incredibly frustrating and would often just end up in a gunfight. But it gets even worse. In some missions, if you get caught, the game decides to can it and makes you start again from your last autosave. But that's not the only reason my controller was about to learn how to fly multiple times. The autosave/checkpoint would often be from bloody ages ago, meaning you've got to replay a big section of the game all over again. This ain't the PS2 anymore, Ubisoft, when I used to replay my games from the beginning every time, as my memory card was always fuller than the crusty socks under my bed. I didn't realise Ubisoft had shares in god-to-hell IKEA desks, and the combat, Jesus Christ, lackluster isn't in it. I think the humongous dong that comes out your arse first thing in the morning is more satisfying than this. Gunfights were just so basic and meh, and don't get me started on the physics. It seriously sucks dog dick. Takedown animations aren't as bad as they used to be, but still define the term underwhelming. I do understand that a Star Wars game isn't going to have the brutal takedowns I wish for, but surely they can do better than this. And I can't forget that Star Wars Outlaws has some of the worst mini-games I've ever seen. Unlocking these loot boxes is almost as painful as looking at Kay's dodgy trim she got from her local Turkish barber. It literally looks like a squirrel on her shithead. But I can't be the only one who loots boxes, but as soon as this mini-game appears, I can't be arsed and just decide to can it. I just don't want to play this damn mini-game. And lastly, the bugs. Jesus. Platforming is utter AIDS at the best of times, but it's even worse when the game decides to bug out and twat you behind a rock, causing you to get stuck. I didn't realise I was playing a 127 hours simulator, for Christ's sake. And guess what? When bugs like this happen, you are once again forced to restart the god-to-hell game from your last checkpoint, which would mean replaying another segment of the mission all over again. At this point, I know it may sound like I'm hating on the game, but with all the negatives aside, there were elements hiding beneath the concentrated dog shit that I actually really like. However, there was always one question I couldn't get out of my head when playing Star Wars Outlaws that maybe some of you might relate to. Why am I not just playing Jedi Survivor, that does almost everything far better and has lightsabers instead of god-to-crud blasters? Like, seriously, did anyone else have this exact same thought when playing this game? Nonetheless, is it possible for Ubisoft to do the impossible and change things around? 3 months since release, the biggest update yet has arrived. Is Star Wars Outlaws finally worth playing? Well, here's the honest truth. Off the bat, there is definitely a good amount of changes here, and some of them genuinely surprise me. Before we truly find out whether stealth has finally improved, which is one of the game's biggest flaws, let's first have a look at the new changes to the combat that was previously piss poor. I must say, gunplay does feel sharper than before, getting in and out of cover feels far smoother, headshots are definitely more satisfying and rewarding, as 90% of the time it will instant kill enemies. And you can even twat those bellends who take cover by using the power module, which is a really nice touch. Although, I must say, despite this update supposedly improving enemy AI, they aren't going to be working out teleportation anytime soon, and often still act dumber than your mum's bedpost a lot of the time. With AI who acts like utter pissants aside, I have enjoyed the gunplay a lot more, and it certainly feels a lot smoother overall. But because it's a PEGI 12 rated game, the lack of impactful kills and gore do bring it down quite a bit. But what about the god-awful stealth? Has it really been fixed? Previously, sneaking about without being detected felt harder than trying to piss with a rod on. But finally, the stealth mechanic gives you a little bit more leeway, and you won't get an instant mission fail if you get detected. So now you can run and gun missions if you prefer to go in loud and leery, or you can still take the stealthy approach if you prefer. It's great to finally have a choice. Not only that, if you do make a mistake when trying to sneak about, enemies are less likely to spot you and murk bullets at that shit squirrel on your head straight away, which makes sneaking about a bit more fun and less frustrating, as detection mechanics have been refined and you can definitely tell the difference. But fixing aspects of the stealth and combat is completely pointless if the game is still riddled with bugs. How does it play now? Previously, character controls and just platforming in general made me give the desk a swift bang every time I encountered one of these climbing segments, as it was often buggy, clunky, and just outright horrible. After spending several hours on this new update, at first I was happy to see that bugs during climbing were a lot less common, and I haven't been shithoused into a rock more times than Patrick Star just yet. These climbing sections in general felt a lot more fluent, although it's no secret that it has been done a lot better in other games such as Jedi Survivor. However, for whatever reason, the unstable and outright awful performance in certain parts of the game still remain and seem more noticeable than before. During one segment where I'm being chased by these utter goblins, my FPS was up and down like a prosty's pants. Even when just approaching the enemy base, the FPS would tank, and for those wondering, it's not my PC, as the game normally runs at 120 FPS on the ultra settings with no issue at all. If you play this on console, do let me know whether you have experienced anything similar. Hopefully this is something that can be fixed pretty quickly, as no one enjoys playing a game like a pissing slideshow on Microsoft PowerPoint. Although I will say, it wasn't happening all the time, and it was only in certain sections of the game. And just before we get my full honest verdict, it's also important to note that this November update has also introduced the game's first DLC story expansion, Wildcard, where Kay enters a tournament that puts her against the galaxy's most notorious criminals. And if you would like to see a dedicated video on whether this is worth playing or not, just let me know by liking this video. So what is my overall honest verdict on Star Wars Outlaws after its huge update? Is it worth your time? I'll be honest, going into this, my expectations were lower than an old bint's tits, and for that reason, this update definitely packed a punch, at least from my experience, thanks to the various changes and improvements we've already discussed. But it can't work miracles. If you didn't like the game before, your opinion probably won't change too much, unless your main complaint was the awful stealth. The changes made to that aspect of the game are definitely the most noticeable, and the game is far more enjoyable to play because of it. But that glaring question of why am I playing this still remains in my head when games like Jedi Survivor exist. Nonetheless, Star Wars Outlaws has certainly improved, so if you like the look of it, definitely give it a go and let me know your honest thoughts in the comment section down below. I would love to know what you think. And to see the GTA 5 remaster we should have gotten, this absolutely blew my mind. Just click the card on screen, you don't want to miss it. Thank you guys for watching as always, and I'll see you next time.